Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Bill Rawls. I have struggled with Lyme disease, overcome it, and my whole focus in life now is helping people do the same. Today we're going to do a lecture that I gave several days ago to the North Carolina Lyme Society, and we decided it was worthwhile enough to make available to a wider audience. So that's what we're doing here. The topic is exploring Lyme disease therapies in the 21st century. Lyme disease is such an odd disease that it's really been very frustrating to a lot of people. So I'm going to try to take some of that frustration and put it into positive thought that we can work forward. So here we go. People have really tried about everything available to get over Lyme disease, from conventional antibiotics of every variety to even turpentine. And it's all directed at trying to kill a microbe, mainly the one that we call Borrelia burgdorferi, but killing microbes has been the focus of just about every therapy out there. But you can't get over Lyme disease just by killing microbes. That's part of the solution, but not the whole solution. The main problem with Lyme disease is dysfunction of the immune system. So if you're not restoring immune function, then you really can't expect to get completely well. The tick-borne microbes that are commonly associated with Lyme disease, Borrelia, Mycoplasma, you've probably all heard these names, Bartonella, and many others, have been around for millions of years. And they've been infecting humans for at least thousands of years, possibly as long as humans have been around. When you think about it, all of these tick-borne microbes have been transmitting disease by way of ticks as long as there have been ticks, probably even back to the days of the dinosaurs. So ticks have been biting humans as long as there have been humans, so you can assume that these microbes have been affecting ticks, affecting humans as long as we've been around. That means the human immune system is very familiar with these things. Familiarity is very important when you look at the status of microbes and how they affect us. If our immune system is very familiar with something, then we do a better job of controlling it than if it's not. An example would be Ebola virus. Ebola stays isolated in a reservoir host that they think is a spider that occasionally bites a bat, and the bats occasionally affect humans, and then you have this new virus that humans have rarely ever been exposed to that cuts through populations like a wildfire. But that's not Borrelia. Borrelia, Bartonella, Mycoplasma, these things have been around for a long time. So the immune system is very aware of the kinds of tricks that they're going to use to manipulate the immune system. So in other words, we're not naive to these things. And therefore, lots of people carry these microbes without ever knowing it. We have no idea worldwide how many people are carrying all of these different microbes. And this is true of many microbes that we're exposed to. We collect these things as we go through life. We're constantly exposed to them. And if our immune system is functioning very robustly, then they don't affect us very much. But if immune function is down for whatever reason, these things can take hold, and you enter into a tug of war that can last a lifetime. So it can make you miserable for a whole lifetime, but it's unlikely to kill you like Ebola. So you have to look at these microbes and how to get over them very, very differently than you would a highly virulent microbe. And restoring immune function has to be at the bottom of that. You have to overcome that tug of war, that vicious cycle that becomes established between these microbes, and there's always more than one microbe, and the immune system that causes chronic immune dysfunction. So chronic immune dysfunction, this underlying thing of these microbes in the margins and immune dysfunction, is the root cause of chronic Lyme disease, but I think it's also the root of fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and many other diseases of our times. Things that are different or define these diseases as slightly different are the genetic makeup of the person, what kinds of things come together to disrupt immune function, and how and which microbes are involved. So those factors are immensely important, and what kind of diseases people get and how they're going to become ill. But the bottom line is the same. It's immune dysfunction, and if you restore immune function, you're likely to overcome these things. So the strategy has to extend beyond just killing microbes. You have to do more than that. So what do you have to do to get well? Inflammatory cytokines. What these microbes do, they don't necessarily have, they don't have genes that code for toxins. In other words, they don't directly harm us by producing toxins or things that can directly damage us. All of these microbes have the common feature of being able to infect cells, and they commonly infect white blood cells. Once they do that, they're in control of that white blood cell. And so they can cause a white blood cell to produce chemicals called cytokines that pull in other white blood cells that generate inflammation. Why would they want to do that? They need to get access to nutrients. That's why they're there. Really, all they need to do is maintain a presence in tissues long enough until another tick comes along, and they can hop aboard that another tick and move along, and when that tick bites another host, then they have completed their life cycle. So they don't need high concentrations in the body. They don't need to overwhelm the host with infection, and generally you find these types of microbes in very isolated areas in the body and in very low concentrations. So they manipulate cytokines to generate inflammation that breaks down tissues, and when the inflammation breaks down tissues, they have access to the nutrients. So one of the prime nutrients for Borrelia, Mycoplasma, and others is collagen. Collagen is what makes our cartilage. It's what holds us together. So where do you find cartilage? Where do you find collagen? Joints, in muscles, heart muscle especially, eyes, skin, and brain. And that's typically where you find a lot of the symptoms from this breakdown of collagen caused by inflammation. So you have to reduce these inflammatory cytokines. You've got to suppress the microbes. You got to retarget the immune system to get it humming again so it can take care of the microbes. Now, this whole process disrupts hormone pathways in the body and disrupts metabolism. It affects everything all the way down to a cellular level, because mitochondria, the energy sources of the cell, are another targeted nutrient or desirable quantity for the microbes. So homeostasis is the balance of all of those things, and if homeostasis is disrupted, then you just feel awful all over. So you got to rebalance homeostasis. You've got to restore the healing capacity of the body to repair the damage, and you've got to protect the tissues and encourage healing. I like to divide therapies up into a holistic approach. Everyone needs a restorative foundation, that foundation of restoring immune function and restoring the ability of the body to heal itself. Symptomatic is more directed toward taking care of symptoms, and then heroic therapies would be those things that we use mostly in our world today. Antibiotics, ozone, other kinds of things that are directed at killing the microbes. Restorative therapy is the foundation. If you're not doing restorative therapy, I think the chances of getting well is small. So what are the components of restorative therapy? A healing diet, You have to eat well. You've got to take care of your body and give your body the nutrients it needs to repair itself. You got to get rid of toxins. We live in a very toxin-saturated world, and removing toxins is important. Cultivating calm. The modern world is very stressful, and stress depresses immune function. Lots of sleep. Sleep is immensely important. Generating endorphins. Endorphins are those feel-good chemicals that we have in our body that stimulate our immune function. And I think the cornerstone of the whole thing is comprehensive herbal therapy. So, healing diet, real food, processed food, the kinds of foods that most people are eating in our world today actually take away from our ability of the body to heal itself. They generate inflammation, they disrupt gut function, they provide excessive carbohydrates that suppress immune function. You got to get back to real food. And that generally means lots of vegetables. For many reasons, vegetables are very important. You have to get away from grains, basically seeds. Seeds have proteins, glycoproteins in them called lectins that disrupt GI function. Most anyone with any type of chronic illness, like chronic Lyme or fibromyalgia, has gut dysfunction. You got to have quality protein sources and healthy fats. Toxins. It's not a matter of just doing a quick 10-day toxin being done with it. It's a matter of being perceptive of where toxins are in our environment. When we live in a toxin-saturated world, most of them hidden, and most of them based on petroleum and mining. So we have heavy metals in our food and our water, other areas of the environment. Our air is not nearly as clean as it used to be. So you've got to be perceptive about ways that you can clean up your environment and your personal environment so you're taking in fewer toxins. You got to support the detox systems of the body. There are a lot of ways to do that. Eating a better diet is really important. There are many supplements that can help support the liver and the intestinal tract's ability to get rid of toxins. And just getting the toxins throughout through your GI tract is really important. You've got to create a healing environment. We are, right now, I'm sitting beside a computer. I've got a cell phone beside me. These things are producing electromagnetic radiation that can disrupt energy systems. You get too much of that and it can slow down the healing process, so you've got to be smart about how you use electrical devices. Minimizing stress factors, cultivating a healthy work environment that work is a comfortable place instead of a constantly stressful place. Some people do have to declare disability to get over these kinds of disorders, but that's not always necessary. Sometimes just working with an employer or working with your situation. I tell people, create a 4-year plan. Where do you want to be in 4 years out? Start planning now. Move ahead so that you're in a better place next year and the year after and the year after as far as how you go about life. Friends and family can provide a lot of support, and support groups, both real live support groups like the North Carolina Lyme Society. Most states have societies that provide support, but also online support, Facebook and other groups. But it's very important to make that support positive support. Not just telling everybody how miserable you are, but working with others to try to work for solutions to find a way out and to actually improve your life and where you're going. Cultivating calm. We live in a world of sensory overload. If you walk down the street of any major city, you're going to hear sirens and noise and people talking and music blasting. Cultivating a calm situation. I found that when I had Lyme disease for about 5 years, I couldn't even listen to the radio in the car. I didn't watch much television. I just had to cut things off. It was too much of a sensory overload. Going inside a store would bother me just from the smells or the odors or the noise or the people. So sometimes you do have to live a little isolated until you can build your reserves back up. You got to learn how to turn your brain off. Now, it takes practice, but it's certainly something that can be cultivated. And as important as anything, just having a positive attitude about life is so remarkably important. Sleep. You got to get sleep. Sometimes it has to be forced sleep. Sometimes you have to use medications to do that in the beginning. But creating protocols and a sleep hygiene. I have a set protocol that I go through every night, and I try to get to bed before 10 o'clock. I don't use computers. I don't exercise in the evenings, and I generally read something that's quiet and calming. So sleep is remarkably important. Some top athletes are now trying to sleep 10 hours a night because they have come to appreciate the restorative value of sleep. That's when the body is rebuilding itself. So it's really important to get sleep. Endorphins. Endorphins, those wonderful feel-good chemicals that we get from exercising. Exercising does a lot of great things. Exercise generates endorphins. Exercise generates natural killer cells, which are so important for mopping up the bacteria and the cyst forms of the bacteria that are, you have to do that to get overcome the disease. Exercise also generates stem cells. Stem cells are cells that are omnipotential. They can form any kind of cell in the body. And we have stem cells distributed throughout our body that are there to replace tissues as tissues become, as they wear out. So stem cells are really important. Now, the problem with fibromyalgia and chronic Lyme and these types of disorders is you just don't feel like exercising. You feel like you have a flu every day, and it's just really hard to get up and moving. So sometimes you have to cheat a little bit to generate endorphins. One thing that you can do is far infrared sauna. Doing sauna regularly and building up over time to a reasonable temperature and 30 minutes a day, whether you buy a sauna or whether you go intermittently to use a sauna in a spa. Sauna can really do wonderful things for doing some of the same things that exercise does. In addition, the sweating involved in sauna can actually help purge toxins from your body. Far infrared sauna is probably one of the best ways of getting heavy metals out of your system. Once you get going, exercise is really great. The way that I generally recommend people start out is with an ancient Chinese movement exercise called Qigong. It's spelled Qigong. But they're slow, gentle movements that get your body moving. It's non-stressful, and it's easy to do. Anybody can do it. You can even do it in bed. But it is enough to start getting things flowing again, getting some of those endorphins flowing again. And then once you build up, yoga, hot yoga especially feels good to people that have muscle pain. It helps work out some of that pain and really makes you feel good. And then the last way to do it is something called low-dose naltrexone. Low-dose naltrexone. Naltrexone is a drug that was developed in the 70s. It blocks opioid receptors in the body. It has no narcotic effects, but it blocks the effects of narcotics. So if you take it, then it blocks, it was developed to help people get off heroin, that if you take it, it blocks the heroin so the heroin doesn't do anything. But in the same respect, people that took it had a lot of pain and discomfort, and they were miserable, and they just went back to the heroin, so it didn't pan out for that purpose. But somebody found that if you use a really low dose of it, 10% of the standard dose, then something interesting happens. It only hangs around in the body for a few hours. It suppresses opioid receptors at a low level, and the body responds by generating endorphins. which is really good for immune function. And that can also help with pain. So it's something that people have found use for. If they have pain, it can be helpful. So low-dose naltrexone is an option for generating endorphins if you're not able to exercise in the beginning, or if pain is an issue. It's been found to be especially beneficial for multiple sclerosis and Crohn's, but virtually any chronic illness can benefit from it. And what I consider the very cornerstone of that restorative approach that is so remarkably important is comprehensive herbal therapy. Herbs do so much for healing, it's really remarkable. And when you think about it, the reason for that is because herbs have to deal with the same stress factors that we do. Plants have to deal with microbes of every variety. Plants have to deal with oxidative stress and radiation and physical stress and maybe even a little emotional stress. So plants are producing a wide spectrum of chemicals to balance hormones, to fight off microbes, literally thousands and thousands of chemicals. Plants don't have an immune system, so they have created biochemical solutions to these same problems. So humans figured out a long time ago that if you eat certain plants, then you get those same benefits, which is very remarkable. So plants have the ability to take care of a wide spectrum of microbes, fungi, viruses, bacteria, protozoa. Plants are making all of these things. Every plant has antimicrobial properties, and a lot of things that we're commonly using for Lyme are things that have been tested for specific microbes. But what we're finding is there are other plants that haven't been tested that are just as good. So there are lots of things out there that you can use. It's really important to recognize that plants are not as potent as drugs. If someone came in with an acute pneumonia, that they had a bacteria that was concentrated in the lungs, growing fast, and the bloodstream got to it very readily, I'd use conventional antibiotics to make them well in several days. But for taking care of a problem that has these low-grade microbes in low concentrations that are slow growing out in the periphery, the very margins of our body, plants make more sense because it's not one chemical, it's a spectrum of chemicals, so resistance isn't a problem, and these things are just suppressive. So it just basically makes the life of the microbe difficult, so you wear them down by attrition. So resistance doesn't occur, and you can gradually overuse them to overcome the microbes. Plants also reduce inflammatory cytokines, which is very important, and that helps the immune system function in a more targeted way. So we're restoring the ability of the immune system to function properly. There's no antibiotic or drug on earth that does that. So in restoring the normal immune capacity, you get the immune system on board to take care of these microbes, and so you're suppressing them, allowing the immune system to do its job, so you have a more natural response. Plants protect things all the way down to the cellular level with antioxidants and other chemicals that balance hormones, restore normal metabolism, so you get a wide spectrum with plant medicine. Now, all plants don't work for us. Some plants are actually poisons. So the things that I'm referring to are medicinal herbs. These are plants that humans have been using for literally thousands and thousands of years. So they give us everything we need, and they do it very safely. And because the potential for toxicity is so low with plants, you can literally use them for extended periods, your whole lifetime. I've been taking herbs for about 10 years now, and the benefits just seem to keep accumulating. Here, getting ready to turn 60, my joints and my general well-being are better than when I was in my 40s. The advantages of restorative therapy is the inherent low risk. It can be used for long periods of time, and it generally costs a lot less than other kinds of therapy. The limitations of restorative therapy is that healing takes time. Herbs take time to work. It takes time to rebuild the body. So it doesn't really treat symptoms directly. With time, symptoms will go away because as healing occurs, the symptoms aren't there anymore. But in the short term, symptoms can be a real problem, especially pain and poor sleep can be a problem. And therefore, sometimes you do need things just to treat symptoms. And treating symptoms alone can help recovery in the respect that it allows people to get more sleep. It allows them to have a more positive attitude. So relieving symptoms can be helpful. Again, symptoms of pain and poor sleep are especially problematic. Types of symptomatic therapy: drugs, natural therapy, and then there are a number of different alternatives. Conventional drugs, narcotics. Personally, I feel that, and a lot of people agree with the fact that narcotics are really poor for treating chronic pain. They're excellent for treating acute pain, post-surgical pain, but if you have someone with chronic pain, that's giving them narcotics is probably the worst thing that you could do for that person. The reason is, the reason that narcotics work is because opioids, morphine, heroin, Percocet, these different drugs that are used that we define as narcotics, act like endorphins in the body. We all have to have endorphins. Endorphins are the chemicals that keep us from having pain. If we didn't have endorphins, we would all be a mass of pain all the time. So when you use a narcotic, you basically replace or intensify the endorphin effect in the body. But because you're giving something that's like an endorphin, it suppresses the ability of the body to produce endorphins. So the more you take narcotics for pain, the more it suppresses your endorphins, to the point that you hardly have any endorphins in the body and you're almost completely reliant on the narcotic. But the problem is your body sees that narcotic as a toxin, so it develops enzymes in the liver to get rid of the narcotic faster and faster and faster. So you end up in a tug of war that you don't have endorphins to keep you from having pain, and you're getting rid of the narcotic so fast that it's not doing anything. So it's a huge problem. There are always better ways to manage pain. NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, ibuprofen, those kinds of drugs are blocking key chemicals in the inflammatory process. They block an enzyme called COX-2 that is for making another part of the inflammatory system called prostaglandins. So if you block inflammatory prostaglandins, you get reduced inflammation. The problem with that is that there are other enzymes that are important for healing. So NSAIDs also block COX-1, which is important for protecting the stomach from acid and protecting the cardiovascular system from inflammation. So these drugs, if you use them long term, cause stomach ulcers and cardiovascular disease. Sedative, sleeping pills, benzodiazepines like Valium and Xanax. These drugs can be beneficial, and generally I steer people away from the sleeping pills because they are so remarkably habituating. Benzodiazepines can be valuable if you use them occasionally. Every now and then is fine. Every day will end up being your worst nightmare because they are have the same addictive potential that narcotics do. Benzodiazepines and sleeping pills suppress GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid in your brain, which you have to calm your brain and nervous system. So if you suppress your GABA and become dependent on the drug, and then you're getting rid of the drug, then you're in a real mess. So occasionally these things can be very good. Muscle relaxers, there's one called baclofen in particular that has less potential for habituation and actually can be used for sleep and calming. And muscle relaxers can be a real lifesaver in certain situations. They're probably better for relieving pain than the narcotics, but still it's not something that you want to take every day. And then low-dose naltrexone can also be beneficial for pain. Natural therapies, cannabis. Probably everybody's heard of cannabis. They know that marijuana comes from cannabis, and it can be very beneficial. Medicinal marijuana and the species of cannabis called hemp actually can be very beneficial for pain, but not have some of the problems that some of the drugs do. It's more available than you realize. There are states that have approved recreational marijuana, but every state is approved for hemp. So you can get hemp-sourced products in any state in the nation and anywhere in the world. So what's the difference? It has to do with a single enzyme. There's an enzyme in marijuana that converts substances, a base substance, into THC. In hemp, that same substance is converted by a different enzyme into CBD, cannabidiol. What's the difference in the two? THC affects endocannabinoid receptors in their body. We all have an endocannabinoid system in the body, and it's and the normal neurotransmitter or normal chemical in the body that affects our endocannabinoid system is anandamide. So anandamide, if you have normal levels of anandamide in your body, you feel good and your immune system is working well and it helps balance. So anandamide affects endocannabinoid receptors that affect other hormones and neurotransmitters in your body. So it's good to have good anandamide levels. THC binds to that same receptor, but it binds very, very tightly so that you get an exaggerated response. You don't get the normal feeling good response that you get with anandamide. You get euphoria. It makes you high. So that's what THC does. CBD doesn't bind to that receptor as tight as anandamide. So you get a little bit of an effect, no euphoria, but also, interestingly, you have the effect of making more endocannabinoid receptors, so the anandamide you have works better. So CBD has no potential for euphoria. People do not get high with it. It has a wonderful effect on the immune system. It can help with pain. In some people, it helps with sleep, but most people I'm talking to don't have much of an effect with sleep, but it's mainly a pain relief. So CBD, cannabidiol oil from hemp, is available in every state. It is legal. There are no restrictions on it whatsoever. You can buy it off of Amazon or many sources on the internet. So it's worth looking into. Herbal therapy, there's some herbs that have sedative properties. You hear a lot about valerian and kava. They are not my favorites because they give kind of an irritating response in some people, and they also can affect liver function in an adverse way. Others that I do like, some of my favorites are bacopa, passion flower, and motherwort. Very smooth, very nice effect, non-habituating, a little bit of a pain relief effect and some muscle relaxing effects. Analgesic herbs, the top analgesic herb is one called Corydalis, and it has mild effects. It hasn't been found to be habituating. It's certainly not anywhere as strong as a narcotic, but it can have some benefit. And then we have all the essential oils. Essential oils are herbs that go through a process of steam distillation just to get the oil out of the plant as opposed to the water-soluble chemicals. So you get a whole different set of chemicals. The essential oils, there's a wide variety of them. They can have effects of boosting immune function, antimicrobial properties, virtually all the same effects that herbs have. I found that essential oils aren't quite as easy. There's more potential for toxicity. They have to be administered mostly by aromatherapy. Some can be applied to the skin or taken orally, but you have to be careful with them because there's more potential for toxicity. And then alternative therapies. Cranial electrotherapy stimulation, CES, is using a low-grade electrical current across the brain. It's a little battery-powered device. You connect the electrodes to your earlobes. You feel a little bit of tingling. And what it does is basically provide electrons. If you look at what the process of inflammation is, from a chemical point of view, it's free radicals stealing electrons from other molecules and breaking them apart. But from an electrical point of view, inflammation is an electron deficient state. So if you run a low grade of electrons across an area, it can actually reduce inflammation. At least that's the theory of why it works. And therefore it can be calming in the brain, and it can promote sleep. So CES, the biggest impediment to that is that devices cost $350 to $750. They work okay. They help a little bit. It's not a cure-all. So the big choice is, do you want to invest in that much money that may only work a little bit for you? TENS units you can get at the drugstore. Similarly, applying electrical current across a muscle to decrease pain, they can have great value and they're fairly cost-effective. Acupuncture and acupressure, balancing the energy pathways in the body, they actually have been found to generate endorphins. Chiropractic manipulation, as long as it's not excessive, can be helpful. Massage therapy is wonderful. And then energy therapy, having someone use their energies to rebalance your energy can be really nice. Works really well for some people, not quite as much for others. And then we get to the heroic therapies. These are the things that kill the microbes, throw the body back into the state that it should be in. So heroic therapies, you know, when you look at conventional medicine, we're using virtually all heroic therapies. We're using drugs, we're using surgery. And whenever you talk about, I call them heroic therapies, so whenever you talk about these things, it's because they have potential for harm. There's a trade-off. So I like to tell people, whenever you're looking at a heroic therapy and you choose to do something heroic, you enter a race. Is that heroic therapy going to have that full benefit that you're trying to achieve before the toxicities of the therapy catch up with you so much that it's starting to do harm? So when you look at acute situations like a broken leg or an acute pneumonia, you need something heroic. You need something that's going to fix that thing as quickly as possible to help the body put the body in a position of being able to heal itself. No heroic therapy actually heals the body, but it can put the body in a position of being able to heal itself better. So that's how you have to look at heroic therapies. So whenever you think about them, think of entering that race. Can you get the benefit before the harm catches up with you? There are a lot of heroic therapies. I divided up into chemical warfare, oxidative, electrical, and natural. Chemical warfare includes synthetic antibiotics. The problem with synthetic antibiotics are that it's very potent, it's very specific. You've got the high concentration of pneumonia in the lungs. You might be able to clear it up in 3 or 4 days before you start killing off your normal flora and suppressing immune function and disrupting homeostasis in the body, which antibiotics typically do. So if you're going to use long-term antibiotics, you've got a real problem there. Once you start disrupting the normal flora and selecting out other pathogens like C. diff and MRSA, you're going to start suppressing the immune function. Antibiotics do some other things that that recently I've been researching. We actually, everybody talks about biofilm, but we actually have protective biofilms in our gut, in our intestines, and especially in our colon. And antibiotics have been found to disrupt those very, very important biofilms, and that can lead to ulcerative colitis and a lot of other problems. Recently, also, antibiotics have been found to kill mitochondria. Mitochondria, the little powerhouses inside every cell in our body that provide the energy from the body, were primordial bacteria. Long, long, long ago, when life was forming, there were high-energy bacteria, and higher living cells picked those bacteria up to use them as an energy source. And they eventually became incorporated into all higher living cells that we call eukaryotic cells. But those mitochondria still have some bacteria-like characteristics. They still have their own DNA. They still have characteristics that are similar to bacteria. So we're finding that potent antibiotics actually kill mitochondria. And that's especially problematic in the gut, but throughout the body. It's felt that that may be one of the reasons a lot of people get fatigued with antibiotics, is it's affecting mitochondria. Synthetic antivirals, we have herpes-type viruses in our body. CMV, Epstein-Barr are herpes-type viruses. There are 8 different herpes viruses that people are typically exposed to during their lifetime. And sometimes if you can figure out which herpes-type virus someone has had, you can use an antiviral, but I found it's really tricky. Because the symptoms are all the same and you've got a lot of things going on, it's really hard to know when one of these different drugs, which is very specific for each certain virus, is going to be applicable. Vaccines work great for really potent, life-threatening microbes. They don't work very well for low-grade microbes like Mycoplasma borrelia, because these things are constantly changing. Silver. A lot of people are using silver for Lyme disease. Silver does have antimicrobial properties. Mercury does have antimicrobial properties. Mercury was used as an antibiotic for throughout the Middle Ages and beyond, until we found out it was really super toxic. Silver probably isn't quite as toxic as mercury, but we still don't have good ways of getting it out in our body, and it accumulates. And unlike other metals like zinc, we have no use for silver in the body. Personally, I found that the herbals work just as well as silver and provide a lot of other wonderful healing properties. Why use silver when you can get things that are less toxic and work just as well? And then turpentine. It's not the stuff from the hardware store. People are actually using turpentine. I actually wouldn't recommend it. It can cause toxicity to the liver and toxicity to the kidneys, but they're using a very, very purified version of pine, and it's basically a type of essential oil. So I guess I skipped through and went through the limitations of antibiotics. Poor response from stealth microbes because they're slow growing and low concentrations. Antibiotics generate resistance. They disrupt all the microbes in the body, which can suppress immune function, create pathogens, disrupt biofilms, and destroy mitochondria. Oxidative therapies. This is some of the newer therapies for Lyme disease. And these primitive bacteria that have been around for millions of years evolved not using oxygen, so they don't like oxygen. So using oxygen or potent oxygen-free radicals, ozone, hydrogen peroxide, can actually kill microbes. And these things do reach some of the deeper areas of the body. So they do get to where the microbes are, where the antibiotics don't necessarily get in those areas in high enough concentration to do any good. So I think there's a lot of promise in oxidative therapies as a heroic therapy. I think that's important. There's a lot of potential for harm here too. Oxygen is profoundly toxic to tissues, profoundly toxic to tissues. And if you're using this as your primary therapy, you're in that race again, and there's a good chance that you're going to cause enough harm that you're not going to get the full benefit of what you want from the therapy. So hyperbaric oxygen is actually getting into a pressurized container with full source oxygen, full concentration oxygen. Air is only 20% oxygen. Air is 90% inert nitrogen. And so we don't actually breathe a high concentration of oxygen. So getting in a hyperbaric changer, you pressurize 100% oxygen, and that gets deeply into your tissues. Believe me, it is damaging your tissues, but hopefully it's damaging the microbes more. Typically, people who use hyperbaric oxygen report that it is beneficial. They do feel great for a while, but those effects don't last. So the next one is ozone, what we call medical ozone. Pure ozone would kill you. There's no doubt about it. If you put yourself in a room that's saturated in ozone, it will destroy your lungs very quickly. So we're talking about only 1% concentrations of ozone saturated into liquid and injected into the veins. Some people are using rectal ozone as a gas and insufflating it into the rectum. I would highly not recommend that because you've got those biofilms there that it's going to disrupt those protective biofilms. It's going to kill those bacteria and break down that barrier, which is going to cause problems. If you're going to use ozone, I would suggest using IV ozone. We are getting more scientists are getting more sophisticated with its use. It's the newest form of ozone is you put in a large bore catheter, pull the blood out of your system or allow your heart to pump the blood, and it circulates through a pressurized hyperbaric chamber with ozone and then back into your body. So it's directly pulling your blood out and killing the microbes, and hopefully carrying enough of that ozone back in your body to actually kill the other microbes in the tissues. People that are using it are reporting a good response. The downside of any of these therapies is they're very expensive. And most medical boards don't allow it. It's not available in the state of North Carolina and many states around the country. It's very hard to come by. They're worried about the potential for toxicity, which I respect. I had some big reservations about ozone until I started researching it, and there are some studies showing that it is a workable solution in some cases. The thing that's most important about ozone, though, is if you're doing that restorative therapy, you may not need it, but it might be something you could do intermittently or short-term or in small doses if you're not quite getting there. So it shouldn't be considered a primary therapy. It's just too toxic. And I think the people that are using it as a primary therapy are making a mistake and probably aren't going to get consistently well. Hydrogen peroxide is another form of oxidative therapy. It's administered similar to ozone through IVs. And then MMS. MMS is an interesting thing. It's basically a relative of household bleach, very similar. It's used as it's used to sterilize water, to purify water. And there was a fella years ago who was using it to purify his water. He was on a trip to the Amazon, and he recognized that he didn't get malaria where everyone in his group got malaria, and he was the only one that was using this chlorine dioxide as a water purifier. So he started using this and for treating malaria and other things in other parts of the world. He wasn't much of a scientist, and we still don't know as much as we would like to know about it. I refer to it as poor man's oxidative therapy because it's not very expensive. It's easy to get. It's not necessarily easy to use. Reading the book about it, people have to administer it in small doses 8 or more times a day to get benefit. And we really don't know about the toxicity of it yet. But I think it's something that hopefully it will be studied enough that we'll know whether it's safe or not and whether it is a solution for helping us out. Again, it's not a primary therapy. It shouldn't be considered as primary therapy at all. It's only if you're not getting where you need to be with restorative therapy. Electrical energy, Rife machines. Rife machines have been around since the 1930s. They were started by Royal Raymond Rife, who was a scientist that was ahead of his time. He took a bacteria in a petri dish and exposed them to what he called ray beam electrical energy. It was a battery-powered device that generated a current, a wave, and he found that it killed the bacteria. And he speculated that these kinds of bacteria, the kind that we're talking about today, were the root of most diseases, including cancers. He was probably way ahead of his time, but the thought of the day, the trend of the day was toward drugs and antibiotics, and so most research on electrical therapy was suppressed. The Lyme community dredged the technology back up in the 80s and found that some people that were exposed to this ray beam were actually received benefit, that they decreased their symptoms and they felt like there was some benefit. There's no science behind it, and so we're going on what was looked at in 1930 and just testimonials of people that use Rife machines. The biggest problem with Rife machines is there are a lot of variety of what you get out there, and nobody is really looking at the quality of these machines. They're not FDA approved. Some are better than others. They cost anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000. So I think the chances of a Rife machine alone making somebody well, curing somebody of Lyme disease, I really haven't read any reports of that. I think it could be beneficial for reducing symptoms, but again, I consider it a heroic therapy that if you're not doing that foundation, you're probably not going to get well. Whereas if you are doing the foundation and you want to add to that, the Rife machines may be something to consider. The biggest problem with the Rife machine is you may spend anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 to get a machine that doesn't do anything. And because no one is evaluating the machines, that's really hard to define. Pulse electromagnetic field is very similar, except it uses an AC current instead of a DC current. Again, we don't have much science there. Lasers are being used in Lyme disease, but more in the form of treating symptoms. Cold lasers, it's a low-grade laser that you put on acupressure points, and it can be helpful for muscle pain and joint pain. Again, it's a device that costs several $100s that you may or may not get benefit from. And then whole body hyperthermia. Some people are going out of the country. It's not available in the United States. Typically, they're going to Germany to have heat therapy. These microbes don't like heat. And so typically the therapy involves undergoing general anesthesia, being put to sleep completely, and raising the body temperature to 105 to a target of 107 for anywhere from an hour to 3 hours. And people typically go through several sessions. People are reporting benefit, but it's It's really potent therapy that does a lot of harm to the body too. It's another one of those things that you're in a race. Are you going to kill enough microbes to actually make a difference before it really does harm to your body? Very, very expensive. You really have to go out of your way. I put that one fairly far down on the list as far as the benefits. Natural therapies, bee sting therapy. A lot of people are doing bee stings. And what we're doing with bee stings is actually stimulating the immune system to go after the microbes more aggressively. It does have benefit. The downside of it is allergic reactions. People have reported total kidney failure, heart attacks, and a whole range of other side effects with this. And those side effects may not show up for a week. That's probably one that shouldn't be at the top of your list. Immunoglobulin, giving immunoglobulins from someone else can pump up your ability to fight off infection. They're really good for acute viral infections. I haven't found a lot of benefit from reported for Lyme disease. Stem cell therapy. Stem cells we've already talked about. So injecting stem cells in parts of the body, there's a lot of research going on right now of actually pulling stem cells out of fat tissue, so using liposuction to remove fat, pulling the stem cells out, spinning them down, and injecting them into joints. They're finding that it does regrow cartilage. It sounds like it's extremely promising therapy. But some people are actually going, again, out of the country. It's not available. It's not FDA approved in this country to have stem cells injected throughout their body. And they're reporting some pretty wonderful benefits, but it's $40,000 base at least. I think you can do a lot with herbal therapy and restorative therapies, and most people will not need that. So if you're looking at a holistic approach to recovery, people that really aggressively embrace that concept of restorative therapy with a cornerstone of herbal therapy, at least half those people are going to get well with nothing else. Whereas people who only do symptomatic, they're only treating symptoms, they're only going from one heroic therapy to another, are likely to continue doing that and not get well. So that concept of a holistic approach to recovery with a solid foundation, treating the symptoms as you need it until you don't need it anymore, and then using heroic therapies only when you absolutely need them, is remarkably important. So I think that winds us up. This is actually a short synopsis of part 3 of my new book. That's a 4-part book that really goes through the whole process of what Lyme is and how you diagnose it, how you treat it, and how you form that foundation, that base that's so remarkably important. So thank you very much for sticking with us through this. I hope you got something out of it. Please take it to consider picking up a copy of the book. It'll be coming out in January, and it goes into all of these things that I talked about today in great more detail. Thank you.